This is our October podcast, although released a little bit late. The winter storm that hit northeastern Pennsylvania at the end of October delayed our recording. This is our second episode. We plan to release podcasts on a monthly basis at the moment, and will continue to produce fresh content. If you missed our first episode on the topic of morality from a secular perspective, go to our website at NEPA Comments, concerns, questions, and suggestions can be sent to Vacula at NEPAFreethought.org. You can find this email address in the Contact tab at the homepage of our website. Websites mentioned and links to more information will be added in the podcast notes for this episode. The NEPA Freethought Society is a secular discussion and activist group located in the northeastern Pennsylvania area. This group is intended to be a coalition of non-believers, comprised of atheists, secular humanists, skeptics, agnostics, etc., predicated on support and community. The group gathers monthly to discuss any pertinent issues and fully intends on defending the rights of the secular when and where appropriate. The separation of church and state is a very important issue, and critical thinking should be prevalent in all walks of life. More information about the NEPA Freethought Society, including upcoming meetings, special guest speakers, and much more, can be found at nepafreethought.org. Although our website at meetup.com is still online for recruitment purposes and events, nepafreethought.org is now our main website. Our next meeting will be the last Saturday of November at 3 p.m. at El Rincon Latino in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Be sure to RSVP on nepafreethought.org if you can make it. We will also be meeting on December 17th for a special meeting at a private residence. Physicist Dr. Tom Concannon will be speaking about cosmology, addressing the cosmological argument in detail from a philosophical perspective, and diving into the physics beyond our current cosmological models, and going deeper into why our physical laws exist in the form that they do. We will be having a special seafood buffet. More information will be added on our website when it is available. I'm Justin Vacula, host of the podcast. I'm the co-organizer, spokesperson, and a board member of the NEPA Freethought Society. I write for American Atheists No God blog, Examiner.com, and my own website/blog at justinvacula.com. I recently graduated from King's College in Pennsylvania with degrees in philosophy and psychology and a minor in professional writing.
I'm Rodney Collins, and the topic of today's show is faith. In addition to talking about faith and an open conversation, we'll end our podcast with commentary on local news stories and talk about our debate challenge to Northeast Pennsylvania.
In their book, How to Think About Weird Things, Critical Thinking in a New Age, authors Theodore Schick Jr. and Louis Vaughn note that faith, quote, belief that does not rest on logical proof or material evidence, end quote, is not sufficient grounds for belief and does not constitute knowledge. Those who invoke faith, Schick and Vaughn note, believe even though there is a lack of evidence to justify a position. Faith does not help one evaluate the truth value of a claim, does not offer any justification, and is an admission that there is no good reason to believe a claim. Obviously, this has huge implications for theists, who, instead of appealing to evidence, argument, or reason, claim that their belief is based on faith, and this somehow justifies the belief. Obviously, as an atheist, I don't think belief in any gods is justified.
Well, as far as faith goes, a lot of times I've talked to theists about their so-called faith and asked them what exactly it is they believe in, and I can never really seem to get a coherent answer when it comes to that. It's always something different when you speak to one theist or another. It's always a mixed mash. But when it comes to faith in things, personally, I don't think that you should have a good reason to have faith in something, not a desire to want something to be, so you can have faith in it. Okay. So, in my opinion, when it comes to things people want or need, it's not a matter of what they want to believe in. It should be a matter of what can be proven, what is correct, other than just being happy to believe whatever is given to you as far as the faith stories, it's the faith belief system. As I said before, I've spoken to many theists, and when it comes to their explanation of this so-called faith, it's very vague.
And that's the interesting thing, too. They'll say that, well, there's not enough reason, or there's not enough evidence, so therefore I will have faith, because you can't prove God. Well, they're putting a really high bar on this word prove for some reason. I'm looking for good evidence or argument for God. We don't need 100% proof or anything, but we need a good reason to do so. And an admission of faith is not good reason, but rather a leap of faith. And I propose that we search for the truth rather than believing, which is this leap of faith. Philosopher Richard Taylor, in his book Metaphysics, argues that truth is worth seeking because, quote, it saves one from the numberless substitutes that are constantly invented and tirelessly peddled to the simple-minded, usually with stunning success. It saves us from the glittering gems and baubles, promises and dogmas, and creeds that are worth no more than the stones under one's feet.
That's pretty much accurate. I have to agree with you on that. There's certain things people should have faith in. Religious faith isn't something I personally would say is a good thing at all, based on what it's based on. Let me put it to you this way. If somebody asked me or told me they could do something for me, and I knew that person had done this many times in the past, they were credible, I might have faith that they can accomplish what they claim. But in this case, what we're talking about is people saying they have faith in something that they can't prove exists. They have no tests for it. They don't question it. They just blindly go along with what they've been told. And that can lead to many, many problems.
Well, there we have to be careful when we say having faith in a person, and this is what sometimes the religious try to do. They'll say, well, you have faith in government. You have faith that your girlfriend or boyfriend or whomever loves you, but this isn't the same kind of faith that one has in God. And I wouldn't even call this faith at all, because when we talk about love, when we talk about trusting someone, we have good reason to do so. And in the case here with religion, we don't have that. And sometimes what goes on is a logical fallacy called equivocation. And that means using a term in two different contexts with two different definitions, although they're trying to say, well, your faith in government is like my faith in God. Well, no, it's not. It's not like that at all. Your faith in God and faith in government, there's a big problem there, because, say, if I have faith in government, I could have good reason to do so. But for belief in God, what is that reason out there? You have to appeal to some things.
Pretty much, that's true. You do need to appeal to some things. When I said I can have faith in certain people for different reasons, that's based on a long history of knowing someone or seeing a consistent pattern or something. When it comes to the kind of faith religionists are talking about, theists they're talking about, that's not the same thing at all. It's what they call blind faith, which, like I said before, can lead to all sorts of negative outcomes. People have faith that their children sometimes will get past an illness based on their religious faith, and will see that the child has died based on the parents not doing what they should have done in the first place. They relied on faith instead of some medical science. That's a big problem. It's extremely immoral to sit back and say, well, my faith can conquer anything. I have faith in this, my God. And then you see all sorts of things happening around you that would happen to a non-believer. And they'll still adhere to this belief and tell someone like you and I that we're completely wrong while facing all sorts of dilemmas in their life because of this faith. What
happens with the faith, too, that's kind of interesting is that it's often unfalsifiable. Say, for example, they'll have faith that their prayers will be answered. And when we get an answer of no, some religious people will say, well, an answer of no is still an answer from God because he wants your life to be a certain way. So if we're going to argue against something and they're constantly going to throw up some kind of smoke screen like that, well, we can never possibly show that your belief is unjustified. So this should make it pretty irrational. And another interesting thing, too, is a lot of these people who claim to have faith will use it as a last resort rather than using some kind of argument. It's really strange to me because if you're going to put so much of your life into this one area, proclaim that this is truthful and want to convert other people or whatever may be the case, one should probably look into your justification for that belief rather than just believing something and telling people about it.
That's true. Well, for those who want to tell someone about it based on their belief that the faith is true when it comes to their God, talk is cheap. Anybody can say anything, make all sorts of claims. Once again, when it comes to what they're capable of doing or not capable of doing something, or things that they can acquire or not acquire, they're pretty much in the same boat as anybody else, faith or no faith. As far as I'm concerned, this type of faith is just a cover for, how you might put it, but it seems to me someone had to have some form of insecurity, if you ask me, if they believe that they have to have a faith in something that they can't prove even exists, and that they're going to sit around and pretty much worship this being and tell other people they should do the same thing, and it's all based on faith. When you ask them, well, can you give me something more tangible other than that? And they pretty much go into either preaching to you, or they'll say, I can't answer that question. You need to speak to someone else, maybe more knowledgeable than me. So I've never been impressed with this faith stuff. Okay, I'm more impressed with people. When somebody tells me something, I can make good sense of it and see things happening or going on based on what they're telling me, not have belief or faith in something and things will work out just fine for you. So saith the Bible, or this preacher or this pastor, and that's just nonsense.
I don't like going to the Bible too often when I have debates or discussions, whatever you might want to call it, with religious persons, and even in my own blog posts, I typically seem to go more from a philosophical perspective. But if one looks to the Bible, you have in 1 Peter 3:15 a command for Christians to have reasons for their belief, and they're told to prepare a defense. And often I don't see that that is the case, so this is kind of incompatible with their faith. And then people will try, well, faith without works is dead, and faith is belief in that which is not seen, which I believe is Ephesians. So clearly we can look at that and get all these different definitions, and we even have incoherent definitions of faith within the Bible. So I'm not even really sure what they're going with. So it's important to get definitions, because as Rodney said earlier, all sorts of people believe in all sorts of different things. And I would wager that if you have a challenge to your belief, that it would be really important to look into what the other side is saying, and possibly even to defend your own beliefs. But when having discussions with theists, I often find that they simply haven't looked too hard at their beliefs, and certainly haven't considered what atheists have to say. Instead of having discussion, they'll say things like, oh, I have the right to my own opinion, there is no evidence either way, or anything like this. Of course, this isn't the case with all theists, but I've seen this, heard this a lot in conversations that I have had. So this brings me to another book called Intellectual Virtues by philosophers Robert C. Roberts and W.J. Wood. They write, one sign of insufficient concern for the truth is that when such people are given an opportunity to test their more cherished beliefs, they decline it or apply it too casually, or offer defenses of the beliefs that are weaker than any that these people would accept in other contexts. So persons who hold faith-based beliefs may show this insignificant concern for truth. Instead, they should reason more appropriately by defending their beliefs, encountering objections, and not accepting beliefs or offering defenses of their beliefs that are products of weak support that otherwise would not be accepted for other beliefs.
One of the things I find kind of interesting is when I discuss with theists about their faith, I've asked them, where does this faith derive from? So I tell them that when it comes to myself and many of my acquaintances who are non-theists, we pretty much use critical thinking to figure out certain things. When I ask them, where exactly does faith come from, blind faith come from, that I can't get any answers for that. I mean, if someone says they fully believe in something wholeheartedly, they stand behind it, and I ask them, well, what makes you do that? And they can't give me a coherent answer, I have to assume that it's nonsense. I have to. If somebody asks me, well, why do I believe in something, I can pretty much give them an explanation as to why I believe in something or don't believe in something. But when I'm asking them directly, what does faith do for them? Where do you get this faith from? Since we know you're not getting your faith from questioning or testing, and they can't answer that, that pretty much leaves them in a position where as though their claims are extremely unimpressive.
And they won't use the same structure of arguments or this faith defense, as I said, in other contexts. Imagine, for example, I'm a salesman, and I come up to someone's door and say, well, I have this pill that you can take, and you'll lose about 2 pounds a day. And, they won't accept me saying, oh, well, just have faith in this pill. It'll all be fine. Don't worry. You can have faith. They won't accept that for a moment. So the question is, if they won't accept it in this context, then why is it acceptable for religion? So the theist will probably argue, well, that's different, or my faith in God is different, or I have good reasons not to believe the salesman claim. Well, what I say is, well, you have good reasons not to believe theistic claims. There are a lot of arguments out there from atheists that show that these beliefs are really problematic. What they'll try to do then, perhaps, is say, well, atheism is a faith-based claim. You have faith to be an atheist. But this is nonsense. Atheism is simply a response, a rejection of religious claims. If you haven't met the burden of proof and you haven't shown good reasons, it's not faith for me to lack belief in God, just like it's not faith for me to lack belief in unicorns, pixies, leprechauns. Now the theist will say, well, those are much different. Those are fanciful tales, and you have no reason for that. Well, even if they are different entities, my point still remains. It still stands the same.
Okay. Like you said, they're pretty much stuck with their faith, and like you said, they'll try and say, well, other beliefs are nonsense because it's not of the same belief that they have. As far as I'm concerned, they're all lumped in the same boat. As far as I'm concerned, they're all claiming they have faith in one God or another. Not one denomination can come up with any proof. They never have, never do, and as far as I'm concerned, never will. I'm not sitting there saying that my opinion can't be changed about something, but from what I've seen and heard over the years, I've been looking into this. All I've gotten is, like I said, incoherent answers or ducking and dodging. I don't know. Go speak to this guy or read the Bible, pray to God and ask him to give you understanding. No, I don't need to do any of that. All I need to do is use my brain and think for myself. And thinking for myself doesn't include blind faith. That's something I have no interest in at all. In any walks of life, actually.
This whole pray to God and you'll understand is quite curious because it seems that it's just simply fooling yourself. Rodney and I had a discussion with some Mormons who were traveling in Wilkes-Barre, and we had a debate for about 45 minutes or so, and one of the final things they said was, well, I can't tell you what the reason is, but you just have to deeply reflect and ask God to reveal himself, and that way you will know. And I said, well, isn't that just wanting it to be true and kind of making it true by having this deep reflection? I don't need deep reflection to get me into this stance. What I need is a good argument. And the interesting thing is, while some people will claim faith, we get apologists out there, such as William Lane Craig, who will give specific arguments that he thinks are sufficient for belief in God, but then in the same debate, he will say things like, well, the immediate experience of Christ will lead us to belief. And one of his videos specifically is called Dealing with Doubt. It's about a 10-minute clip, and he says that Satan is an enemy of your soul and is trying to make you disbelieve in God. So it's interesting, too, in the same clip where he says that no matter what evidence would come to counter his belief, he would still believe. And this is what philosopher Alvin Plantinga tried in his book Warranted Christian Belief. He tries to argue that belief in God is properly basic, so there cannot be any kind of defeater to the belief. Well, this seems to render theistic belief irrational. If nothing can come up to show that your belief is wrong, this seems to be quite crazy. It seems to be very conspiratorial. We hear this a lot with some 9/11 truthers, where they say, oh, well, that's just part of the conspiracy, or that's what they want you to believe. I mean, we could play these games all day, but if we can't say, well, there is something that will show that my belief is wrong, it seems like we're not really justified in believing it because we're just going to make up these excuses.
It's kind of childish when you look at it. Grown people, adults, sitting around believing in such silly things and then trying to persuade other people, adults, to think the same way they do and act the same way they do, and this is based on, once again, this faith. When I've had debates in the past with certain theists, I've asked them questions like, if you become very ill, okay, if you feel very ill above and beyond a regular sickness, would you get down on your knees and pray to your God until hopefully the illness subsided, which would be a part of their faith, or would you take yourself to the nearest hospital for medical attention? And they pretty much say they're going to a hospital. So I have to question this so-called faith, because a lot of times they'll say they use faith, they have faith, faith is the way. But when I ask them basic questions about the way they live or the things they do under certain circumstances, this faith stuff is out the window completely at that point. They pretty much automatically go to what would be necessary for the situation rather than the faith situation where they're going to pray about it and try to work it out through a prayer and faith. That is, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, it's mostly just something they say as to have people believe that that's what it is they're doing. The faith thing is proper, that without it you can't live the right way, you won't have a proper life. But as far as I'm concerned, if you're living that way, you're living a very gullible life. That faith will sometimes bring people around who will be willing to take advantage of you, which you're willing to believe in without evidence or proof. And that it can't be a positive thing to be seen as someone that can be used or somebody that's gullible. That can be a very negative thing. There's always people out there targeting people who aren't that sharp. We'll see that you can look at statistics and see that scam artists, a lot of people who contact people by phone to get money, will contact theists most of the time, and the elderly also, in order to use them to get money out of them. But when the theist will say, well, I have faith in my God, I would have to assume that faith in the God that they claim is real, the God will protect them from people using them to get over on them, to scam artists. But that never seems to be the case, because we're constantly seeing people of faith on TV saying how they've lost their whole entire savings and they've had this problem and that problem.
God's plan.
I guess that must be what it was as far as they're concerned. But in the world I live in, I see all sorts of, I see good things, I also see bad things. I don't think anything good or bad has to do with any faith. Things happen. It's a matter of how you deal with the things when they happen that makes you a better person or not. Teach you something, life's lessons. But to sit around and say, I have faith and it's all I need in a God, he's real because I believe he's real, as far as I'm concerned, you're not living in reality. And once again, that could be detrimental to certain aspects of your life. You can never tell what's going to happen. But if you're of the mindset that this God is up there and he's watching over your personal relationship with him, and when I asked him, well, what makes you think that? It's just faith. To me, that's very weak. And we can say the same thing for any other supposed God or non-gods. Have faith in whatever you want to claim you have faith in. But if it doesn't sound like it's a good thing, or it doesn't sound intelligent or look intelligent, it's not rational, I personally can't adhere to that.
And that's where we get the what seem to be rationalizations. They'll say things, well, bad things happen as part of God's plan, or responding to the, well, why do you go to doctors? Well, God works through people. God only helps those who help themselves. And it seems that God helps those who help themselves. How can we distinguish people helping themselves from God helping people? It seems that God just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Then we'll get to certain rationalizations, such as, there's nothing that the good Lord and I can't handle. Well, so how about that Indian Ocean tsunami? Did the little children who die handle that? Perhaps that might be getting more into problem of evil territory, but if they could claim faith, well, I have faith that's part of God's plan, or that's just part of what happened to this person, God needed them in heaven, this and that. Well, it seems again that there's nothing that can falsify this belief. And that's very problematic for the believer.
Well, I've met lots of children who have faith in things that we would automatically know that it's not real. Children believe in certain things that we can prove aren't real. And it seems to me that a lot of adults have this same type of mindset, but when you try to prove to them that the things aren't real, they reject that, no matter what you're telling them or showing them, because this faith built up in them is pretty much guiding them. I don't understand how it guides them, but they claim it guides them, helps them get through life. As far as I'm concerned, you don't need to have faith in invisible beings to get through life. You need to grapple with life on life's terms, and no matter what comes your way, even if you're not prepared for it, just do the best you can to deal with situations, rather than people sitting around saying, well, I've got God on my side and I have faith in the Lord, he'll provide, or he'll make sure of this and that and the other. Like I said before, as many times people will say they have faith and that they know God, they're personal with him, but things don't go the way they planned them to. And I asked them afterwards, well, what happened? They don't have any answers. I think that's very telling when it comes to if there's actually a God up there that they're personal with, that can help them. Personally, if I had a problem, I might want to talk to a friend or a member of the family or something about something personal. If I have a problem, I wouldn't sit there and say, well, I have faith in this God or that God or this belief system. I go with pretty much what I have at my disposal, and that's, if I need to speak to someone, it would be someone that can talk back to me and give me their perspective on what's going on in my life and how possibly help me or assist me with, whatever my situation is. But when it comes to somebody who wants to adhere to a belief system like that, I can almost guarantee they're going to have more problems than they ordinarily would have.
Sometimes it's interesting, too, because they don't even want to have the discussion, because they say, well, I have my faith, and no matter what you say, I'm still going to believe. But as an atheist, I'm quite open about my beliefs, or lack thereof, and I'm not afraid or unwilling to respond to challenges. While not all atheists are like this, I think that a position of openness is very important to keep oneself in check. Unfortunately, so many theists I've met in person, or who even discuss matters with me online, respond in an odd manner. They claim offense, they want immunity from criticism, or sometimes even argue that those who challenge their beliefs are immoral for doing so. they'll say, well, I have a right to my own opinion and my belief should be respected. And they get angry. Quite recently, I was compared to a racist for challenging one's belief in a very respectful manner. And it just really boggles my mind, because if someone disagrees with me, I'm more than happy to have the conversation. It's good to learn where other people are coming from. It's good to keep myself in check, as I said. Robertson Wood write in Intellectual Virtues, those who refuse to face compelling contrary evidence that provides a defeater to their beliefs are acting in a dogmatic fashion. Dogmatists respond irrationally, Robertson Wood explain, to oppositions to their beliefs when others have an intelligent, communicative, open, listening attitude toward criticisms.
One of the things I find interesting when it comes to the topic here is, for example, the debate challenge that you issued to our area. Apparently, faith doesn't assist the theists when it comes to taking up people on challenges when it comes to their beliefs. They have faith when it's time to make assertions and accusations, or just criticize or ridicule somebody like you in this case. But when it comes down to them saying, well, I'll have this debate with you because I have firm faith and belief in my God and whatever that encompasses, it doesn't look like they have any faith all of a sudden when it comes to something like that. But just let them talk freely, and there's plenty to be said. But the minute you come to them with questions or discussion or debate, I don't see this faith anymore. The faith evaporates all of a sudden. Because if the faith was as strong as they claim it to be, I don't see why I personally have a problem with a debate or a discussion or any of these type of things. So to me, it's just, once again, like I said, it's something that they just throw up the smoke screen. It sounds good to them. It doesn't sound good to me. It sounds like nonsense, because once you get down to the bottom of it, there's nothing to it. There's nothing other than just them saying that they have this faith, and other than that, they can't provide you any other evidence or proof or anything of that type.
It's often intense anger is one of the responses to challenges, even when I go out of the way to be respectful and attack ideas instead of persons. One topic that I've talked about at length. I don't want to repulse people, and I certainly don't want to make people angry. It's unfortunate that has to happen in the process unintentionally, but I want people to stick around and have the conversation, have some respectful dialogue. It's really important to do that. But one of the last defenses that they might try is, well, we really can't know. We can't be sure. And some people might argue that it's impossible to know anything about some supernatural claims, but then they still go on believing somehow. They'll claim, well, we can't really know the mind of God, but then they're very happy to say that God sent his son, Jesus, to die on the cross for our sins and make all these other claims. So they're saying we can't know anything about the claims, but then they're still making specific claims. Perhaps to be more charitable, they'll say, well, we can't know some things. Well, that seems to be an unfalsifiable position too. When you don't have an answer, you're just going to claim, oh, we can't know. Well, while we obviously have some limitations, we can still work with the knowledge we have now and make claims based on current knowledge. There's no reason to despair, and currently, as I look at it, there's no good reason to believe, so I simply don't. If it really is the case, though, that we can't reach a certain truth, we should remain agnostic about the claim and not go on believing in a God. While truth might be outside of the reach of humans, justified beliefs can still be had, or at the very least, we can try our best to reach the truth and make justified claims about reality. Jonathan Van Vig, in one of his books, writes, "There is no reason whatsoever to think that believing the truth is always impossible. The best that could be claimed is that there is no guarantee in any given case that we have achieved the state of believing the truth. Perhaps it follows that we should not hope for the chimera of infallibility."
That's good. One of the things that gets me, though, about faith is, how can I put this? When somebody says to me that they have faith, and like I said before, I ask them about questions about the faith, can't respond in a coherent manner. But I asked them also, well, if you have faith in something that you claim is real, but there's no evidence for it, why would you bother to have faith in it? Like I said before, people of all walks of life run into hard times, bad times, terrible times, things affect people everywhere, good and bad. So when somebody says to me they have faith, and I ask them, okay, so you have faith in a religion, and they'll tell me yes, what I want to know is what this faith brings them that we don't receive with non-faith, okay? Because talking about something is one thing, but getting something out of it is a whole other thing. And I don't really see what they're getting out of it other than maybe a happy feeling. They say, well, I feel wonderful about my God because I believe he's real. And that's why I feel wonderful through faith. Like I said before, there's nothing impressive about somebody telling me something doesn't even sound logical or rational. And then they sit there and say, well, you should believe in this right along with me because it's true. But they can't provide me with a lick of evidence or anything like that. So I can't go along with that. And I don't understand why they want to go along with it either, unless they have a fear of something.
Well, it could be a lot of things, of course, but as far as benefits go, I mean, a belief can give you all sorts of benefits, but what we're worried about is whether something is justified, not whether it can be beneficial. I mean, belief, for example, as Sam Harris has said before, that Angelina Jolie is going to come and marry me, or perhaps I have a diamond buried in my backyard, can make me very happy at the moment, or can make me feel that I have a great position in life, but should one really go around believing something which they have no reason for?
Well, the reason I said that might be out of fear is because when I talk to theists, usually what I'll get is this is how I was raised. I was raised this way. My family taught me this. My family, friends, so on and so forth have taught me this. It's all around us. And if you read what the Bible says about those who don't have faith or who refuse to come to God, it's pretty terrible what they say is going to happen to you. That's why, in my opinion, a lot of times I say people are doing this or saying things out of fear rather than, apparently it's not out of proof. Okay, there's no proof, obviously, or if somebody had proof of being this, they'd be very well known. They'd be rich, too. They call it some proof. But, no, like I said, I have to sit back and evaluate these things and ask myself, why would somebody say to me they have faith in this and can't do any better than just tell me you should have faith too because someone told me I should and I read about it in an ancient book. They need to take it way further than that.
I mean, I've shifted positions in the past, and I see this as a sign of progress. Obviously, I'm an atheist now. I used to be Roman Catholic, but after I became an atheist, I've shifted positions on free will. And with that, I wanted to see what the reasonable arguments were. So I looked into both sides of the issues and came to the conclusion that my belief in free will really didn't stand on too much. And while we can have a whole podcast about that, that's just simply one example. Abortion was another issue I shifted my position on, and perhaps that just was part of Christian belief. Well, there was a big indoctrination thing there.
At the time you considered yourself to be a Christian, what was your beliefs based on?
Well, I recall a conversation I had with two friends of mine, and my responses were the stock, well, that's why it's called faith. And that really challenged me. I had a respectful dialogue with them, and soon after, when I said I care about the truth, and this belief in God is really a deciding factor in my life, so I want to see if it's true. Otherwise, I'm simply chasing the dragon. Mm-hmm. So once I had that mindset of I care about what's true, that's really where the wheels started to turn. And today, as a skeptic, I can see arguments from both sides. It's impossible, perhaps, to get all the biases out of the way, but I can try to do my best to hold true beliefs, and that's really important for me.
Well, but before you actually decide to delve into exploring things for yourself and looking more into it, I don't think you were adhering to the belief system and the faith system because you truly believed it was true because of something somebody showed you or demonstrated. I mean, you can tell me whether or not it was based on people telling you it was the real deal or not, unless you only had experience back then or not. But for me, when I was a child, I never considered myself to be religious at all. But people were constantly telling me about faith and the Word of God and so on and so forth. And just sitting back analyzing, watching things and analyzing things, it never took from me. I always thought it was ridiculous. So I never had any faith in anything like that. I pretty much put my faith in, which is also hard to do, certain people. You know? But
that's a different kind.
It's a different kind. But I get results from that. Okay. I don't know. I've never seen anybody actually get results from a faith in a God. They might say they did, but can they prove that they did? I've had people tell me they got this, they received that and the other from their belief and their faith in a God. It's all you have to do is believe in God and you will receive things. Well, I believe you can receive things also without belief in any gods or faith in any God. All you have to do is work towards the things you want and be knowledgeable about the things you want and the things that you don't want. And that can take you a long way. That's how progress is made.
Well, a good skeptical tool that many listeners might be familiar with is the idea of Occam's razor, that the simpler explanation is often the better one. So if we can explain a certain phenomena without using the supernatural, then perhaps it's a better explanation, and we should reject the supernatural one. So people might say simple things like, well, St. Anthony helped me find a certain book, or God helped me find my car keys. Well, why would we even need to posit the supernatural? Why can't we just explain it in terms of the natural? I don't really get that. But when I was a theist, I was brought up to believe that this was the default true. My parents believed in it. I went to church, and I just thought that this was the way things were. I respected my pastor. I thought he was a great guy, and I didn't think anyone would be deceiving me. And of course, they almost certainly believe that this stuff is true, and I'm not saying they were lying or anything like that, but as a theist, I heard about hell, heard about Adam and Eve, and I just took this thing at face value. And it's weird because later in my faith, I often found a compartmentalization where, as I mentioned before, faith would apply to religion, but in other areas of life, I typically wouldn't resort to faith. So perhaps it's the case that some people think it's okay in some areas and not in others. And one thing that really kept me as I saw evidence of my belief, I look at it now and I find it foolish. When I was receiving the sacrament of Holy Communion, I had a communion wafer before I got the communion because my mother told me it would be okay and it would be a preparation to get the wafer. And when I had it, I felt this really weird feeling, and it was a very bad taste in my mouth. And I interpreted it as, wow, that's God sending me a sign that I wasn't supposed to have this early. And I held on to that, and I thought that was really good. And I remember on the way to confirmation, there was a song on the radio about angels. I was saying, oh, God's really with me today. And I look back on this and see, wow, having these beliefs, you'll see patterns everywhere. Like John Nash, patterns, patterns, patterns. It's really a mindset you can get into and find these everywhere. I remember from Dan Barker, he's the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. He writes in his book, while he was a minister, he was driving down a road and he eventually went into a cornfield, and he thought, well, God is sending me this way to go in the cornfield. And if I recall correctly, he eventually got to a dead end, and he also interpreted that as a sign of God. So really, it seems that you can go anywhere with this faith and think that a responsive yes or no or whatever it may be can be an indication to show that your faith is justified. But looking at it from a more rational perspective, it's clearly not.
Yeah, it makes good sense to me. To the theist, it doesn't, though. It's hard to cut through the layers of this irrational defense that they use. I try to speak to people when I can, people I know that can have a civil discussion with me about things like that, faith and what it does for them, and so on and so forth. The few that will discuss it with me, like I said before, is very vague. And when I said that I think it's out of fear, basically when you read the Bible, or ask somebody who's more knowledgeable, supposedly about the biblical stories, and I ask them, well, what does it say as far as if you don't have this faith? What can or will happen to you? And it's some very negative stuff they're telling me that can happen to a person that doesn't have faith. So that's where I look at it and say, well, I believe people are most of the time just fearful to buck the system, if you will, and go against the grain and say, well, okay, they might not come out and say, okay, I don't believe it anymore. But to even just take the time to investigate these things, that's not the norm. People just stand by what they've been told, what they've been taught. To me, that's brainwashing. Fear has always been a good tool when it comes to making people believe in what you want to believe in, or at least do what you want them to do. So, like I said, when I look at the situation and evaluate it, I don't see anything about it that I want to be a part of as far as this faith, the belief in the God, and they refuse to look into it, and there's nothing you can tell them. Somebody might claim to be open-minded, but the minute you tell them, well, this is incorrect, and here's the reasons why, they might want to argue with you, and the argument is empty. Like I said before, they've been taught this. They never went out and studied anything or sat back and had a discussion with people, an open discussion. Most of the time what you'll find is people just agreeing with each other, and that's pretty much the end of it. They'll just say, yes, we all have faith, we're all believers, and everything is going to be great because of this. And as we have said before, that's not the case. Everything is not always great because of a faith or a denomination or whatever you're into there. It's pretty much things happen. Good, bad. But if you sit back and say, well, I have a leg up on you because I have faith, I like to know what that leg up is.
Let's see the statistics for that too, right?
What is this leg up? What do you have on us that that you can, other than sit there and say you have a God and you can say he does this and you can say it? Well, can you show me what this leg is you have up on us is? I haven't seen that yet. What would that be?
I mean, although the argument might be considered juvenile by some, if faith were supposed to bring certain benefits, I would hope to see some kind of severe disparities between atheists and theists, where, for example, atheists would be more sick, getting more accidents and things like that. But as Rodney said, the same stuff seems to be happening to people quite randomly.
It would probably happen more often to theists, at least in this country. Where Christians dominate this country as far as denominations go. If when it comes to crime, I have to assume, based on the number of Christians we have in this country versus non-Christians, when crime is taking place, I'll have to assume more crime is being done towards Christians, given the fact that there's sheer more numbers of Christians out there running around doing things in this country involved in stuff. But when asked specifically about their life, how life is treating them, what's going on in their lives, I always hear the same stuff. It's always the norm. I don't ever hear anything that will give me the idea that their belief system has helped them in a way that we couldn't understand because we're not believers. But if you can help me understand by showing me something or at least explaining it, then it should make a sense, and maybe you can get me on board somewhat. But I've never heard or seen anything so far when it comes to faith that will lead me to believe I should be a part of that.
And it's interesting too, because in philosophy classes I've had, faith is a non-starter because we need to show reasons for beliefs. But apparently with Christian belief, or even in theology classrooms, faith is lauded as a good thing. And I really find that to be quite strange. Many academic theologians, and some I've even had discussion with on my website and in person, will reject a lot of what lay theists might claim. And God gets reduced to a metaphor, or perhaps, in the way of John Hott, there's a layered explanation, and God likes drama, and God likes building these universes to see stories, and God just seems to get smaller and smaller and smaller. So I say to the academic theists, why don't you just say that the belief is metaphorical, you enjoy it, you like the stories, and just leave it at that, instead of saying, oh, I'm going to have faith and believe. It seems to be an inconsistent position there. Perhaps if some are listening to this podcast, I'd like to hear from theists out there why you have faith. Why do you have faith instead of simply giving up the belief and thinking of it as a metaphor or some kind of story that you like? I don't mean to reduce it or anything, but I mean really, I can read Lord of the Rings or listen to a great song and really get inspiration from it. And I think that's what's happening with some believers, but they just want to say that they have the supernatural belief. So my question is, why have the supernatural belief? Faith is simply not a valid pathway to knowledge. Those who hold faith-based beliefs have no good reason to hold their faith-based beliefs. Otherwise, they would not claim to have faith and instead cite reasons. All sorts of believers in supernatural claims hold faith as a valid pathway to belief, but faith is simply not reliable. Believers arrive at different conclusions when they invoke faith. Those who assent to faith positions effectively end any discussion based on rationality, evidence, and intellectual honesty. Simply because people believe that certain propositions are true does not entail that they are. People should not take leaps of faith when there is no good reason to do so. If there were good reasons to justify claims, faith would never have to enter into the picture. The more honest position is to consider evidence, review the arguments, and arrive at beliefs based on reason rather than faith.
Well, that's what I would hope they would do, and that's why I try to tell people we need to work on critical thinking and hashing things out when it comes to things we don't understand, or working towards things that we want rather than just saying, well, all I have to have is faith and things will come my way. I was told this. If you want to sit back and rely on that, I would assume you will not go as far as you want it to go in life. If you'll sit back and just rely on faith and what you've been taught by the priest or your relatives or whoever might have brought you into this, all I can do is pretty much try and talk to people. And when I say try, I mean really try, because most people, theists, don't want to hear it. even though they have no problem with talking to me about what they believe in.
Indoctrinating children.
Yeah, they have no problem with coming at you, talking at you, not talking to you, talking at you about what they believe in and what you can get from it. But the minute you ask them a few questions about this, direct questions, they fall apart, and that's another telltale sign that this faith thing is nonsense.
And we get the smoke screens, of course, too, as we talked about before.
Of course. There's as we say, obfuscation. That's just something they'll use when they really can't do anything other than pretty much try to bail out of a discussion. So smokescreen time.
You can't know the mind of God. He works in mysterious ways.
Rather than admitting that they're outmanned or outgunned or whatever term you want to use. Because, I mean, like I said before in the past, there's been times in my life, mostly when I was younger, of course, people make more mistakes when they're younger, and as you get older, you should have less and less mistakes, hopefully. But there's been times in my life I made some mistakes that were embarrassing to me. And I never forgot the mistakes I made because of the embarrassment factor. And that, as far as I'm concerned now, was a good thing. At that time, I didn't like it. You know, embarrassment, people don't really like to be embarrassed, but it can be a building thing. It can help build.
It's progress.
Yeah. So when I talk to theists, I think sometimes they are embarrassed. I think sometimes I can see sometimes they seem like they're embarrassed, and they'll, instead of dealing with it or trying to rationalize, they'll pretty much say, well, I don't want to speak to you anymore. I have to go talk to somebody who can spend my time on it and shows promise or whatever. I don't have more time for you and your non-belief. But as far as I'm concerned, if I wanted to go talk to someone about life and try to tell them some positive things, it would be based on the things that we know, rather than me saying, well, we should believe in this or we should believe in that and just have faith. That, to me, it's not helping anybody do anything. So what it would be doing is harming them, in my opinion. And I'm not here to harm people. If anything, I'm trying to help people. And I don't see faith as being helpful at all.
Yeah, it's really interesting, too. Perhaps it's the case for some of buyer's remorse. They've invested so much time, so much money, they have the community, and they possibly can't give it up. And then we get the rationalization, and they fall into a rationalization trap, where they'll make up all these things to try to justify the belief when it really has no rational standing. So that's all we have to say on faith for today, although it might come back up, who knows. Our first news story is a Reuters article that was published on October 27th, titled, Pope Expresses Shame for Christian Violence in History. Here are some comments from the article. Pope Benedict said, quote, "As a Christian, I want to say at this point, yes, it is true. In the course of history, force has been used in the name of the Christian faith," he said in his address to the delegations at an Assisi Basilica. "We acknowledge it with great shame. It is utterly clear that this was an abuse of the Christian faith, one that evidently contradicts its true nature," he said. Benedict, who in his address condemned terrorism, said history had also shown that the denial of God could bring about a degree of violence that knows no bounds. He said the concentration camps of World War II revealed with utter clarity the consequences of God's absence. Thursday's gathering included 4 people billed as non-believers, agnostics the Pope said had been invited to represent people in the world who have no faith but are, quote, on the lookout for truth, searching for God. He said such non-believers should not be confused with militant atheists, who he said live in the, quote, false certainty that there is no God. And here we see a lot of the common things. We've heard time and time again, as have other atheists, that atheism leads to violence, but such a claim is absurd. Here the Pope recognizes that there is a link between religious belief and violence, but dismisses it as an abuse of the Christian faith, and one that evidently contradicts its true nature. So the Pope is committing what readers or listeners know as the no true Scotsman fallacy. Well, look, that's an abuse of the Christian faith. That Christian did it, oh, that contradicts the nature of the faith. Well, so what? Even if the nature of the faith is peace, love, and joy, it still can be carried out in the name of the Christian faith. He talks about the concentration camps. Well, one simply has to look at Hitler's belt buckle that said, Gott mit uns, God is with us.
As you said, the Pope said, we acknowledge it with great shame, but it is utterly clear that this was an abuse of the Christian faith. And he's talking about the force they were using over the years. Based on what the teachings of the Bible, how is it an abuse of the Christian faith? Why is it a shame? In the Bible, it specifies that force is supposed to be used, that they're killing people and killing animals, wicked animals, and doing all sorts of stuff in the Bible. So I don't understand how it is this man can sit here now and say we're ashamed of the things we've done when the Bible clearly dictates to go out and be violent against those who don't believe and take their things. You know what I'm saying? So, might makes right. So I don't understand why it is. I actually understand because we have better morals as time has gone on. But to say, well, we fully believe in the Word of God, and then turn around and say we're ashamed, he might as well say we're ashamed of the Word of God. Because the Bible is very clear on what they can and can't do. And violence, it doesn't say anything in there about not being violent. It pretty much says be violent if you feel as though you need to be. Especially when you run into somebody who's not of our faith.
Well, one thing for sure is a lyric from the song that we had opening the previous podcast. It's, forgiveness is not for sale, nor is the will to forget. And bad things have happened in the Christian faith, but it's going to be really hard to forgive that. And we see a lot of things that are going on now that are extremely harmful that people just aren't addressing, such as child abuse within the Vatican and many other religious places. That's almost systematized. We also see the opposition against condoms, and that's extremely harmful. And they're going to be on the wrong side of history with this one. They're going to be apologizing in the future. We see that with gay marriage, too. We could look back about maybe 50 years and see that interracial marriage was viewed as a bad thing, and people were using the Bible against that. And something that Rodney hopefully will comment on here is now we have African Americans who happen to be Christians who are opposing gay marriage, and it seems just to be the craziest thing.
Well, they have a lot of nerve to oppose something like that, unless they're completely unaware of the history of slavery in this country and how it came about. If somebody wants to say that they're a thinking person and that they have feelings, I don't understand how they can sit back and say, well, these gay people shouldn't have any rights. They're horrible people. They're abominations. They're no good. How they want to live their lives is really nobody's business unless they're harming someone. Somebody wants to have a partner of the same sex. That doesn't affect me. So I have no problem with that. In the black community, people, like I told you in the past, are not as educated as they should be. If you ask me, in our country, I can't even really name off the top of my head one African American apologist. Okay, that will stand out. So when it comes to the black community or African American community, the level of knowledge is a lot less than, say, the Catholic Church. Most African Americans are Baptist or Methodist or something of that nature. There's some African Americans who are Catholics also, and I have questions about that. Why would an African American Catholic or be a Catholic and sit there and say, well, we should tell Africans in Africa don't use condoms? That's really messed up.
Yeah, we have to be careful though, and hopefully we're not committing this, and listeners are free to call us out if we are, to avoid the genetic fallacy. And what that is because something comes from a dubious start, that one should reject it. And some Christians try this with Planned Parenthood. They want to oppose Planned Parenthood and allege that Margaret Sanger was involved with the KKK or something similar. Well, even if that were the case, that's not an argument to say that their position is wrong. But in the case of African Americans, it's a very peculiar situation. You could look at apartheid, for example, in South Africa, where whites came in to evangelize to the persons who were under apartheid and were actually telling them that it was a mandate from God. And it's just a crazy kind of Stockholm Syndrome type deal. But to move on to the next, as previously mentioned in this episode, the NEPA Freethought Society has issued a debate challenge to Northeastern Pennsylvania in order to have a positive educational experience for members of the community. It has been about 3 months, and so far only one person, Charlie Biblebuck Hatchko, a local apologetics writer and a candidate for Luzerne County Council who is running under the banner of Christian Principles in Government, has accepted the challenge. The time and place will be announced in the future. Reverend Marcel Dotson of Field of Grace United Methodist Church is also interested in the debate challenge, but plans are currently on hold. A personalized letter was sent to the Diocese of Scranton, particularly to Bishop Bambera, and no response has been received despite the bishop's emphasis on evangelization in an August 2001 document from the Diocese of Scranton. Bambera wrote, quote, "I hope you will have evangelization at the heart of our pastoral agenda, sharing it with others and helping to transform the world in Christ. Evangelization, spreading the good news of Christ, is the essential mission of the church." There is no shortage of capable preachers in the area who should be more than willing to engage me in a debate about belief in any gods, but for some reason, so many are silent. And this leads us to a local newspaper that published a letter to the editor written by Rodney called "Why Has No One Taken Up Debate Challenge on Religion?"
Yes, before I read it, I'll make a quick statement. What I did was I looked around for some time after you made the debate challenge and kept my eyes and ears open to see if anybody was interested in the challenge, and it seems nobody was interested, as you say, except for one person. So I figured I might want to write a letter to the editor and see if I can stir things up somewhat, pretty much just pointing out the obvious. But here's what I wrote to the letter, to the editor. Approximately a month ago, local outspoken activist and spokesperson for the NEPA Freethought Society, Justin Vacula, issued a public challenge for a public debate on religion. To our great surprise, not one local theist has taken Justin up on his challenge to date. During the nativity scene incident a couple of years ago, when Justin launched an offensive against the Luzerne County Courthouse to correct a constitutional wrong, literally hundreds of local theists flocked to their computer keyboards in an obvious effort to personally attack Mr. Vacula, but never his arguments. Commenting while cloaked is far too easy, but to put your face, your identity, and your reputation on the line in a public civil debate on religion, we simply get radio silence. Justin displays no lack of courage when it comes to expressing his convictions. And given the fact that Justin has done nothing against his fellow county residents, other than disagree with their position on religion and uphold the U.S. Constitution, so what's all the backlash and vitriol actually about? I think that it's about this biblical passage, 1 Peter 3:15, Justin's ongoing challenge, and the fact that personal attacks have been the best defense local theists have been able to muster to date. Justin's intentions aren't to attract the negative emotional response as we keep seeing from local theists, but rather a positive intellectual response, which we have yet to see from local theists. So the question is begged, where are they now? Where are all of the so-called, self-proclaimed patriots of the faith here in Luzerne County? In the letter.
It's interesting, too, because a lot of what I'm calling excuses are being used to avoid this debate challenge. Some people are saying, well, you're just looking for attention. And this is kind of a funny claim because I already have it. And if I really were looking for attention, and that was the primary goal, which kind of insinuates that I'm not being very serious about what I'm writing, saying, or believing, I would simply convert to Christianity. The local churches would love me. I would be a former atheist who's now a Christian, and I can really run that deceiving game. But I don't want to do that. It's not about attention. It's to have this discussion, to have people listen to what we have to say. The theist can come, the atheist can come, anyone can come who they want, and I'm sure an auditorium will be packed. A debate like this, as far as I'm aware of, hasn't happened in the area, and I think it would be a great thing for the community. So this upcoming debate with Bible Buck will prove to be very interesting, and I'm really waiting to hear the response that the theists will give after the debate. Perhaps I'll win the debate, and perhaps they won't like Bible Buck, or they'll think that he wasn't a good challenger, and then I'm going to predict the future here, so let's see if I'm going to get it right. They're going to say, well, he was a chump. His arguments were really bad, and you should have debated so-and-so. Well, where was so-and-so? Why haven't they accepted the challenge before? This is what happens for, as listeners may know, on the atheist experience, where all these theistic callers call in and people complain about the callers. Well, we can only take who we're going to get. If these people with these great arguments are out there, then they should accept the challenge. So I don't understand what the problem is.
Well, as religious as our area is, I had assumed in the beginning that they'd be jumping for a chance to pretty much back up their claims, or at least to be able to shut you up, at least in that case, put you in a position where as though they could show you say it's false. But not only had they didn't take up on the challenge, but when I wrote my letter to the editor, they refused to even reply or comment on, well, here's the reason why we don't feel as though we need to debate this guy, or something of that nature. It was just, like I said before, radio silence. And anytime somebody tells me that they have full-blown faith in their God, and this faith brings them things, obviously it doesn't bring you enough knowledge to be able to debate someone when it comes to religion. Because given the sheer amount of theists in our area, and not one, well, actually one person, as you said, took you up on it, that's kind of pathetic.
All right, and that was the October episode of our podcast. More information about the NEPA Freethought Society, including upcoming meetings, special guest speaker appearances, and much more, can be found at nepafreethought.org. Myself, Justin Vacula. My website can be found at justinvacula.com.